Welcome back to another exciting and wacky episode of John Trying to Read. Woo! It's not so much me trying to read, it's me trying to read and add accents and try and air out the iffy bits. But don't worry, I've read ahead today, so we're all good. I'm going to attempt a new accent today, so pray for me. Right. We're reading Charlie in the Great Glass Elevator, written by this guy, even though it's mirror imaged. No, it doesn't work. Yeah. So yesterday, the world went a little bit mad. They thought that, there's a bomb inside the Space Hotel, and yeah, basically. And the president said a lot of stuff yesterday. So I'm going to carry on, because the 8 figures inside the Great Glass Elevator have just climbed on board the Space Hotel USA. This bad boy, look at that. Beautiful. So they're on board. Okay. Gonna jump in. Hope you guys are enjoying yourselves so far. Do please share these videos, won't you? Makes all the difference to Uncle John. Thank you. Right, here we go then. Hi, Chloe. Okay, let's dive straight in. Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, Chapter 5. Men from Mars. There was no floating inside the Space Hotel. The gravity-making machine saw to that. So once the docking had been triumphantly achieved, Mr. Wonka, Charlie, Grandpa Joe, and Mr. and Mrs. Bucket were able to walk out of the Great Glass Elevator into the lobby of the hotel. As for Grandpa George, Grandma Georgina, and Grandma Josephine, none of them had their feet on the ground for over 20 years, and it certainly wasn't going to change their habits now. So, when the floating stopped, they all three plopped right back onto bed again and insisted that the bed, with them in it, be pushed into the Space Hotel. Charlie gazed around the huge lobby. On the floor, there was a thick green carpet. 20 tremendous chandeliers hung shimmering from the ceiling. The walls were covered with valuable pictures, and there were big soft armchairs all over the place. At the far end of the room, there were the doors of 5 lifts. The group stared in silence at all this luxury. Nobody dared speak. Mr. Wonka had warned them that every word they uttered would be picked up by Space Control in Houston. Is that in Texas? Houston? I'm not going to even pretend to know. In Houston, so they better be careful. A faint humming noise came from somewhere below the floor, but that only made the silence more spooky. Charlie took hold of Grandpa Joe's hand and held it tight. He wasn't sure he liked this very much. They had broken into the greatest machine ever built by man and woman, the property of the United States government. And if they were discovered and captured, as they surely must be in the end, what would happen to them? Jail for life? Yes, or something worse. Mr. Wonka was writing on a little pad. He held up the pad. It said, "Anybody hungry?" The 3 old ones in the bed began waving their arms and nodding and opening and shutting their mouths. A bit like fish. Mr. Wonka turned the paper over. On the other side it said, "The kitchens of this hotel are loaded with luscious food, lobsters, steaks, ice cream. We shall have a feast to end all feasts." Suddenly, a tremendous booming voice came out of a loudspeaker hidden somewhere in the room. "Attention!" boomed the voice, and Charlie jumped. So did Grandpa Joe. Everybody jumped, even Mr. Wonka. "Attention! The 8 foreigners! You foreign astronauts! This is Space Control in Houston, Texas, USA. Look at me, I know my geography. Hey! You are trespassing on American property. You are ordered to identify yourselves immediately. Speak now." No. Whispered Mr. Wonka, fingers to his lips. There followed a few seconds of awful silence. Nobody moved, except Mr. Wonka, who kept saying, "Who are you?" boomed the voice from Houston, and the whole world heard it. "I repeat, who are you?" shouted the urgent, angry voice, and 500 million people crouched in front of their television sets, waiting for an answer to come from the mysterious strangers inside the Space Hotel. The television was not able to show a picture of these mysterious strangers. There was no camera in there to record the scene. Only the words came through the TV. Now the TV watchers saw nothing but the outside of the giant hotel in orbit, photographed, of course, by Shuckworth, Shanks, and Showler, who were following behind. For half a minute, the world waited for a reply. But no reply came. "Speak!" boomed the voice, getting louder and louder and ending in a fearful, frightening shout that rattled Charlie's eardrums. "Speak! Speak! Speak!" Grandma Georgina shot under the sheet. Grandma Josephine stuck her fingers in her ears. Grandpa George buried his head in the pillow. Mr. and Mrs. Bucket, both petrified, were once again in each other's arms. Charlie was clutching Grandpa Joe's hand, and the two of them were staring at Mr. Wonka and begging him, with their eyes, to do something. That's how you beg with your eyes. Mr. Wonka stood very still, and although his face looked calm, you could quite see his clever, inventive brain was spinning like a dynamo. "This is your last chance," boomed the voice. "We are asking you once more, who are you? Reply immediately. If you do not reply, we shall be forced to regard you as dangerous enemies. We shall then press the emergency freezer switch, and the temperature in the Space Hotel will drop to minus 100 degrees centigrade. All of you will be instantly deep frozen. You have 15 seconds to speak. After that, you will turn into icicles. 1, 2, 3. "Grandpa," whispered Charlie as the counting continued. "We must do something. We must. Quick." 6, said the voice. 7, 8, 9. Mr. Wonka had not moved. He was still gazing straight ahead, still quite cool, perfectly expressionless. Charlie and Grandpa Joe were staring at him in horror. Then, all at once, they saw the tiny twinkling wrinkles of a smile appear around the corners of his eyes. He sprang to life. He spun round on his toes, skipped a few paces across the floor, and then, in a frenzied, unearthly sort of scream, he cried, "Thimble Fees!" The loudspeaker stopped counting. There was silence. All over the world, there was silence. Charlie's eyes were riveted on Mr. Wonka. He was going to speak again. He was taking a deep breath. "Bango Booney!" he screamed. He put so much force into his voice that the effort lifted him right up onto the tips of his toes. "Bango Booney! Daffo Dooney! Yubi Looney!" Again, the silence. The next time Wonka spoke, the words came out so fast and sharp and loud they were like bullets from a machine gun. Zoom, 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 zoom. He barked. The noise echoed around and around the lobby of the Space Hotel. It echoed around the world. My phone is running out of battery. "I got 15%. We'll all be good. It's fine." Mr. Wonka now turned and faced the far end of the lobby where the loudspeaker voice had come from. He walked a few paces forward, as a man would, perhaps, who wanted a more intimate conversation with his audience. And this time, the tone was much quieter. The words came more slowly, but there was a touch of steel in every syllable. Bear with me, I've got to read some non-English words. "Kirasuki Malibuku, Weeby Wizzy un Yubi Kuku, Alipenda Kakamenda, Pants Folundo if no suspenda, Fuikaka Kandarika, Weeby Stronger Yubi Wika, Popakota Boroka, Very Risky You, Provoca, Kati Kati Moons and Stars, Fanfanshi Venus Mars." Mr. Wonka paused dramatically for a few seconds. Then he took an enormous deep breath, and in a wild and fearsome voice, he yelled out, "Kitty Bibi, Zunk! Fumboluizi, Zunk! Gugumiza, Zunk! Fumikaka, Zunk! Anapola Lala, Zunk, Zunk, Zunk!" The effect of all this on the world below was electric. In the control room in Houston, in the White House in Washington, in palaces and city buildings, and mountain shacks from America to China to Peru, and 500 million people who heard that wild and fearsome voice yelling out these strange and mystic words all shivered with fear before their television sets. Of course, they can't see him, can they? So they don't know it's Willy Wonka. Everybody began turning to everybody else and saying, "Who are they? What language was that? Where did they come from?" In the president's study in the White House, Vice President Tibbs, the members of the cabinet, the chiefs of the army and the navy and the air force, the sword swallower from Afghanistan, the chief financial advisor, and Mrs. Togsipus, the cat, all stood tense and rigid. They were very much afraid. But the president himself kept a cool head and a clear brain. "Nanny!" he cried. "Oh, Nanny! What on earth are we going to do now?" "I'll get you a nice warm glass of milk, huh?" said Miss Tibbs. "I hate this stuff," said the president. "Please don't make me drink it." "Summon the chief interpreter," said Miss Tibbs. "Oh, summon the chief interpreter," said the president. "Where is he?" Oh, I'm going to do a new accent. "Right here, Mr. President," said the chief interpreter. Well, what language was the creature spouting up there in the space hotel? Be quick. Was it Irish? Not Irish, Mr. President. Ha! Then it was Tagalog. Either Tagalog or Ugro. Not Tagalog, Mr. President. Not Ugro either. Was it Tulu then? Or Tungus? Or Tupi? Definitely not Tulu, Mr. President. And I'm quite sure it wasn't Tungus or Tupi. Don't stand there telling him what it wasn't, you idiot, said Mrs. Tibbs, or Miss Tibbs. Tell him what it was. Yes, ma'am. Oh, hang on, wait, this is the... Yes, ma'am. Miss Vice President, ma'am, said the chief interpreter, beginning to shake. Believe me, Mr. President, he went on. It is not a language I've ever heard before. But you know every single language in the world. I do, Mr. President. Don't lie to me, chief interpreter. How can you possibly know every language in the world when you don't know this one? It's not a language of this world, Mr. President. Nonsense, man, barked Miss Tibbs. I understood some of it myself. These people, Miss Vice President, ma'am, have obviously tried to learn just a few of our easier words, but the rest of it is a language that has never been heard before on the earth. Screaming scorpions, yelled the President. You mean to tell me that they could be coming from somewhere else? Precisely, Mr. President. Just keep checking my battery level. Ooh. Like where? Said Mr. President. Who knows, said the chief interpreter. But did you not notice, Mr. President, how they used words Venus and Mars? Of course I noticed that, said the President. But what's that got to do with it? Aha! I see what you're driving at. Good gracious me. Men from Mars. And Venus, said the chief interpreter. That, said the President, could make for trouble. I'd say it could, said the chief interpreter. He wasn't talking to you, said Miss Tibbs. But what do we do now, General? Said the President. Blow him up, cried the General. Oh, you're always wanting to blow things up, said the President crossly. Can't you think of something else? I like blowing things up, said the General. It makes such a lovely noise. Whoop, whoop. Don't be a fool, said Miss Tibbs. If you blow these people up, Mars will declare war on us. So will Venus. Quite right, Nanny, said the President. We'd be truculated like turkeys, every one of us. We'd be mashed, like potatoes. I'll take 'em on, shouted the Chief of the Army. Shut up, snapped Miss Tibbs. You're fired. Hooray, said all the other generals. Well done, Miss Vice President, ma'am. Miss Tibbs said, We've got to treat these fellows... Wait, she's lisping now? We've got to treat these fellows gently. The one who spoke just now sounded extremely cross. We've got to be polite to them, butter them up, make them happy. The last thing we want to be is invaded by men from Mars. You got to talk to them, Mr. President. Tell Houston we want another direct radio link with the Space Hotel. And hurry. Chapter 6. Invasion. What? Not invasion. Invitation to the White House. They're quite different words. Hold me voice. It's all good. Only 2 chapters, right? Invitation to the White House. Check me battery. We're all good. The President of the United States will now address you, announced the loudspeaker voice in the lobby of the Space Hotel. Grandma Georgina's head peeped cautiously out from under the sheets. Grandma Josephine took her fingers out of her ears, and Grandpa George lifted his face out of the pillow. You mean he's actually going to speak to us? Whispered Charlie. Shh, said Mr. Wonka. Listen. Dear friends, said the well-known presidential voice over the loudspeaker. Dear, dear friends, welcome to the Space Hotel, USA. Greetings to the brave astronauts from Mars and Venus. Mars and Venus? Whispered Charlie. You mean he thinks we're from... said Mr. Wonka. He was doubled up with silent laughter, shaking all over, and hopping from one foot to the other. You have come a long way, the President continued. So why don't you come just a tiny bit farther and pay us a visit down here on our humble little Earth? I invite all 8 of you to stay with me here in Washington as my honored guests. You could land that wonderful glass air machine of yours on the lawn in the back of the White House. We shall have the red carpet out and ready. Now, I do hope you know enough of our language to understand me. I shall wait most anxiously for your reply. There was a click, and the president went off the air. What a fantastic thing, whispered Grandpa Joe. The White House, Charlie. We're invited to the White House as honored guests. Charlie caught hold of Grandpa Joe's hands, and the two of them started dancing round and round the lobby of the hotel. Here's a picture. What a stroke of luck! Mr. Wonka, still shaking with laughter, went and sat down on the bed and signaled everyone to gather round him close, so they could whisper without being heard by the microphones. They're scared to death, he whispered. They won't bother us any more now, so let's have that feast we were talking about, and afterwards we can explore the hotel. Aren't we going to go to the White House? Whispered Grandma Josephine. I want to go to the White House and stay with the president. My dear old Dotty Dumpling, said Mr. Wonka. You look as much like a man from Mars as a bedbug. They'd know at once that they'd been fooled. We'd be arrested before we could say, how do you do? Mr. Wonka was right. There could be no question of accepting the president's invitation, and they all knew it. But we've got to say something to him, Charlie whispered. He must be sitting down there in the White House this very minute, waiting for an answer. Make an excuse, said Mr. Bucket. Tell him we're otherwise engaged, said Mrs. Bucket. You are quite right, whispered Mr. Wonka. It's rude to ignore an invitation. He stood up and walked a few paces from the group. For a moment or two, he remained quite still, gathering his thoughts. Then, once again, Charlie saw those twinkling, tiny, smiling wrinkles around the corner of his eyes. And I'll show you the picture in a second. And when he began to speak, his voice this time was like the voice of a giant, deep and devilish, very loud and very slow. There he is. And there are the chandeliers, I assume. Battery check, we're all good, 13%. It's fine. This is what Mr. Wonka says. In the quelchy, quaggy, sogmire, in the mashy, midious, harsh land, at the witchy hour of gloomness, all the grobes come oozing home. You can hear them softly sliming, glissing, hissing o'er the slubber, all those oily, boily bodies oozing onward in the gloam. So start to run, oh skid and daddle, through the slubber, slush and sossle, skip, jump, hop, and try to scaddle. All the gropes are on the roam. In his study, 240 miles below, the president turned white as the White House. Jumping jackrabbits! He cried. I think they're after us! Oh, please let me blow them up, said the ex-chief of the army. Silence, said Miss Tibbs. Go and stand in the corner. In the lobby of the Space Hotel, Mr. Wonka had merely paused in order to think up another verse, and he was just about to start off again when a frightful, piercing scream stopped him cold. The screamer was Grandma Josephine. She was sitting up in bed and pointing with a shaking finger at the lifts at the far end of the lobby. She screamed a second time, still pointing. And all eyes turned towards the lifts. The door of the one on the left was sliding slowly open, and the watchers could see clearly that there was something thick, something brown, something not exactly brown, but greenish brown, something with slimy skin and large eyes, squatting inside the lift. Tension! I love it! Oh! Oh no! I can't show you what it is! Unless you go back and pause it. Darn it. Don't do that. Right. You have to come back tomorrow at 5:30 to find out what's in the lift. I'll give you a clue. I mentioned it in the last book. Yay. Right. 5:30 tomorrow then. Come back and, gets very exciting now. As if it's not exciting already. Am I right? I mean, have you guys read this book before? Yeah? No? Yeah? Who knows? Yeah. I'll always say this, but do please share these videos for me, because it makes a difference. More people listen to them. It gives me more gumption to keep going, if I get 2 views, I'd be like, what's the point in carrying on? You know what I mean? Huh? Yeah, you know what I mean. Okay. I'm going to stop now. Yeah, please, honestly, do share them, because it doesn't take much, but it does make a difference to old John. Yeah. Thanks very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed that. I certainly did. Good grief. See you tomorrow at 5:30. Ciao.